So today we're going to talk about the magic phase. So, oops, oh, he did a little magic trip. So always start by burping. So you burp the baby before you get started with the magic phase. No, so today we're going to talk about the magic phase. A little bit the way it's going to go is we're going to show what is the magic phase, and also what are the different kind of schools of magic you can have. Then how do you pick your spells. After that we go into how to cast a spell and do the normal stuff, go through the book and what are all the different phases. Hey there, monkey. You're a beauty. Oh, is that better? And then after that is done, we're then going to go and actually do a playtesting where we should continue with this scenario where the Skavens are now going to wreak havoc with their spells. So that's the goal for today, to get to that point. And then after this episode, we'll do the shooting phase and then the fighting phase. Hey there, what do you think? Should we do magic? Should we do it too? Yeah? Yeah? Say hi to the internet. Hello. We need to play the magic phase. We'll start with that and then we'll go into the basics. So here are the things that I would recommend that you always have ready before you start. So if you start here to looking at it, the first thing you need is you need to have the magic cards. We'll go into how you pick those, but these are the standard 8 lores that you can pick. I highly recommend you pick up a stack of this so you have all of them. That's mainly the ones they're going to use most of the time. But then also, depending on the army you play, right now we're playing Skavens, and because of that then you have the Skaven Magic, and they have 2 different ones. They have a normal attack one and then they have a poison one. And for this video I'm going to use both the poison and their attack one just to show a little bit how the Skavens work, but we could just at least have gone through and used any of these. I will do a quick clip on what is the main item for each of the 8 lores, so you know a little bit what it's all about. The other thing you're going to need when it comes to items are all the different magic ones has different kind of ways of the small one to the large circle to a flame weapon as well. So you need to have these a lot during the magic phase. Dice wise, you use a lot of the special dice as well that you have, the what I call the Warhammer dice, the artillery and the directional ones. Then you have the other dices. You obviously have to have your normal d6 depending on which army you have. Just either get like the normal white dice, a bunch of them, or I highly recommend you get different kind of sets of dices for the different armies, and that it makes it kind of fun. Plus, if you and an opponent have different dices, you know whose dices are what. And remember, don't let them touch your dices. That is should be a rule that you have. So even though it's easy if you roll 6 and they have to roll 6 dices, have them take their own dice and roll those. The other thing, what we normally have is some extra dices. Sometimes I have a d4 here as well, 4-sided, but at least have a few damage ones, special one, and maybe one a little bit of larger numbers, because that's always good to have. Also, if you have like a vortex, something, it's good to put that down. What is the center? The other thing is the rule measure. You're going to need that again with inches, so you can always tell how far it is. Get at least someone that is 6 inches, but we recommend having like a real one like this, so you can always do it. It does help if you have a small one too for when you do small moves, but always have a real one. The other thing is directional is very important as well, that you have something to see what is a 45-degree angle. Almost everything in Warhammer has to do with a 45-degree angle. Another way to do this too is to get a laser, and that is really good to have as well with you. Obviously, if you're going to bring a laser, you might as well get a gun as well, so if the opponent don't agree with your rules, you know what to do. So that is that. The last part is you need to have a wizard. They come in different kind of flavors. What I've done here, since we did pull out the Words of Chaos and Skavens, here's for instance is the Skaven General that we have. That is a level 4 wizard with that is being held up by some Skavens, and that helps when you go into a close combat. You actually get to use those as well. So riding something is very helpful. For instance, on the Word of Chaos side, you can easily get something like this. It's a disc that you fly around. It's even better, and then you can have your wizard on top. But then you can also take him off and use some siloed, and that's a good way to do it, because then you can have them separately. And if you lose a mount, then you can go walk around. This card we can't lose. And then you have different flavors of them. For instance, here's one. And here's another version of them. And in the game today, you're also going to see the Plague Priest that is part of it, and that's going to be a level 3 and not level 4, just so you can see the difference in trying to pick the spells. And then you can also have different kind of wizards in the game. I mean, there's tons and tons of different ones out there that you can pick. But this is what you need. These are basic items that you need for today to go through this video. Also, of course, you need, as always, one of the books. So first, we're going to go through a little bit of the sequence of how to play the Magic, and then we'll go into what are the 8 different lores, and I'm also going to throw in the Skaven Magic as well, and what they're all about. So in the Magic phase, you're going to have a specific wizard. That wizard needs to, before the game starts, have already picked his lore. So you can't bring to the table, then look and see what the opponents are, and then pick which magic lore you want. That would be a huge advantage for the player that does that last, as they would then tailor their magic phase. One of the things with Warhammer is really fun is if you don't know what you're playing, so it's a little sad if your opponent only have one army, because then you know already what that is. But if you have playing someone like me that has almost every army except a few, you would never know what army I'm playing. You would never know how I'm going to make that army, because each army you can make in tons of different ways. So for the same thing with your wizard, you come, you have written it down, you show your opponent, I decided I'm going to play today. My opponent Baylor would have then seen that I was going to have 2 wizards. One is level 4, Ruin, and then you have a level 3 of Plague. Then I'm going to have to roll that up. And I'll show you how that's done when we actually roll up the spells. The wizard levels are between 1 and 4. There is certain things like items that can give you an extra 1. So there is actually level 5 wizards out there. And technically, not a level, but you can actually get bonuses like a level 6 with certain items as well, but it's very, very rare. It makes a huge difference if you have one higher level wizard level, or can use 1 extra point when you're trying to spell or cast a spell. So it sounds like not that much, but when you only have a few dice and every single time you get this additional points, it makes a difference. What is the spells that you have? We're going to show exactly how that is done after we go through this spell lores, but it is, you get a certain amount and then you get to pick. But it's also random, it makes it fun, so you have to roll. That is something you don't do at home, something you do in front before you get going. And what is the phases of the Magic phase? It is really 4 phases. You have the roll for the winter magic, then you have the cast, then you have the dispel, then you have the spell resolution, and then you have the next spell. So in other words, you first have the winter magics, it's only one time. You roll, you see how strong the wind is. So depending on the phase, and this is very fickle magic in this game, sometimes you can get really lucky and you can win a game by 1 magic spell, or you can have a whole game and pretty much all your wizards were useless. They didn't get anything done. That happened to me many times. Or you can be extremely unlucky. You paid very much for a wizard sitting on a beast, and suddenly you roll something called miscast, and we go into that, or like a fumble in a role-playing game, and suddenly the whole character just gets sucked up in the warp and he's gone. I mean, those things happen, and it makes this game fun. So even if you're very strategic in planning, the dice can change stuff, but again, the movement phase is more important than anything else. But stuff like this can really either make your day or ruin your day. But remember, the opponent on the other side normally has the opposite reaction of what you have. So overall, it's still going to be fun for someone. Then the casting, the spell, and the spell resolution, they all happen every time. And there's a few ways to stop that and go into it, and we'll go into those details as well. But I think for now, I think we'll stop there and we'll go into what are the different lores you can pick. Then we're going to pick the actual spells that my 2 wizards have, and I'll show you how that is done. We just went through, if we backtrack a little bit, on the lores and the different types of spells. The next we need to discuss is, how do I get dices now to actually cast the spell? And I'll go through all this in the end of scenario when we go through the whole magic phase, but for now, like, what is it we need to know? So what I've done is I've taken a page out of the book that has to do with winds of magic. What is this winds of magic that you speak of? In a Warhammer world, the wind blows the way it goes every time. So every phase, and every your magic phase and opponent magic phase and back and forth, you have to roll how strong the magic is. Some army types, actually, like demons for instance, something happens during the magic phase as well. So it really have to look in your army book if something changes this, but the basics is this following. I, as the Skavens, that are now my turn, it's my magic phase, I'm going to roll 2 dice to see how strong the wind is, and that's what's called the winds of magic. How strong is it? And that will then give my power pool. That's how many dice I have, and you want as many dice as possible, because then you can actually outcast what the opponent can dispel. There's a whole school of thoughts which are the best numbers that you can roll, and we're not going to go into that because this is for basics, but roll the dice and then you're going to see what happens. The opponent then is going to take out of the 2 dice, they're going to take the largest dice. So let's say I roll let's just actually see what happens when I roll it, and then we'll see. So let's take these small dice that I have and then roll. So for the wind of magic, I'm going to start now my magic phase. The first thing I do is roll, and it's going to tell me I got a 5 and a 3. So that means 5, 6, 7, 8. So that is going to be the dice. So if I was now the Skavens, I'm brown here, I would then take 8 dice for me. And I didn't bring enough dice here for this. So 8 dice. This is now my power pool. The next thing that's going to happen is the opponent's going to say, yeah, but hey, I get to dispel. So Baylor over here, that's sitting on that side now, right now, enjoying the sofa, he is then going to get automatically 5. That is the basics of how you get the winds of magic. Now, this can change. So depending on what you have, you might have a model in your game that says you get to add 1 more dice to your pool. So this is something that you will then use. So these 8 dice are the basic. Then you can maybe add because you have a model for that. Or it might even say take away some dice. But opponent can also have something else on their side that change this. But let's say you don't have a model that gives you dice, because I don't see anything here on the table that I have anything, unless there's a magic item, but that's not how we've been making these armies. And this is more just for fun. The next thing I'm going to say is, okay, now I have something that is I can add on depending on how many wizards I have. So for each wizard, I have a chance to channel an extra dice. So for instance, let's take the Skavens. I have 2 wizards. One is level 4 and one is level 3. Doesn't really make a difference what level they are. And what happens is that unless they have an item, because I have something called a channeling staff, for instance, so on a 5 and a 6 I get a dice, but normally, let's just go through this as normal. We have no magical items to get more. For each of my wizards I can roll a d6, and if I land a 6 I get an extra dice. So I roll a 5 and then boom, I rolled, I'm faking this, I rolled a 6. I got an extra dice. So now instead of 6, or instead of 8, I have 9 dice. However, the opponent also has a wizard, and this opponent will then come in and roll a dice. I rolled a 5, therefore Baylor did not get a roll. What was that? No, you cannot eat the dice. Sorry about that. The dog loves these, so I used to have more of these. So that's how you get the power dice. Something to remember is that you can never have more than 12 of these dice. So if I get really lucky and I roll, say, 12, and then I roll a couple of 6s, or I have extra stuff, you'll have to remove those down to 12. Same thing for the dispel, you can never have more than that. And that's, I would say that's probably the basics of how you get the power dice. So this is going to be now the power dice that we use in the game. But it's very simple that way. So remember, again, roll 2 dice, decide what the power is, let's say we had a 5 and a 6, the larger one the opponent gets. Next, do channeling, roll a d6 for each of your wizards. Whatever 6 you get an extra dice. If you have a, let's say the Empire has a chariot that gives you an extra dice. Almost every army has one way to give you extra dice or take away from the opponent. It's just kind of basics. And then when you get it, you count the dices. Do you have more than 12? Remove the remaining. And that's how you get the winter power, and you see how much you have for the actual magic that you're going to cast. So next we're going to go through how do you actually cast a spell and how do you resolve it. So we'll go through this in more detail. If we take care and look down at the table, what we set up here is a army that you have a wizard here. He's level 4 going against the chaos warriors as well, and horses. And he has all the spells from the Lore of Fire. What was that, Baylor? What do you think? Baylor just mentioned that I have been cheating, that this is no way that a level 4 can have all the spells from the Lore of Fire. That is correct, actually. Level 4 can maximum have 4 spells, and we go through when we're picking the spells later on for the game how that is done. But for now we're going to pick, let's say, the fireball spell of the signature, and as Baylor pointed out, I'm obviously not allowed to have them. So let's say one of these was the spells I could have. What is the first thing you're going to do? I've taken out the pages here, so if you zoom in you're going to be able to follow along. But we have already figured out that I have 9 dices to cast, and he has 5 dices to counter. So a couple of things that we need to do before we go into it is really talk about what are the different kind of ways of casting. So I'll go through a basic one before anything else. So I'm going to look at the fireball. Fireball costed 5, if you remember. The spell here was costed 5, and with the range I'm going to decide to go a little bit further than the 24. Let's say I decide I'm going to go instead for the 36 inches. And then you might ask, but it is within 24. Why would you ever do that? If you take the measuring stick and go and say, but I don't need it, I want to go with a smaller one. The reason for that is that if I also go with a larger one, especially the one with a 48, I get to do 3 d6 hits. And remember, that's 3 of these. Alright, Baylor, I'm going to need one of those back. And I'm going to, instead of just doing 1 d6 hits that does almost no damage, I want to go with 3 different kind of attacks at one time. So that's why I decided to go. Now you said, why don't you always do that? It's because it costs more. It normally costs 5, but instead now to cast this, you're going to need the 18 instead. So how do I know how many dice is to roll? Everyone does this a little differently, but the way I do this is that if you think about it, what is an average of a d6? It's either 3 or 4, so that's 3 it's somewhere there between 3 and 4, so 3.5. How do you roll 3.5? Let's try that out. I haven't got 3.5 yet, but let's imagine we did this 100 times more and you realize that there is no 3.5. It's just the average. So what I normally go is that I do the lower of the 2, so 3. So if I want to cast something that costs anything, I take 3 dices to me and count 3 for each. That will give me the average of 9. Some people then add an extra 4 because to get the realistic average. But I like to do a little safe, so I normally do this with 3 dices, gives me 9. But I also have, this is a level 4 wizard. So with him I get plus 4. So if I'm taking this for 9 as an average, plus 4, that's 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. So what that will give me is I can cast now anything that costs roughly 13. If I add another dice, that's 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. So now with 5 dices to do an 18 one is an average. I should technically pass it. But there's still a chance, it's actually a very large chance I don't do it. So from this instance, I'm going to take 6 dice to cast. And you say, oh, that's perfect, you just cast the 6 dice. But what do I have left? To cast 1 spell, I only have 3 left. So realistically, you won't actually utilize all your dices like this when you want to cast multiple. You'll take some chances. But what could happen if I don't get this? There's a couple of things that can happen. Is that if you don't able to reach the number, you're no longer allowed to use this guy. He actually loses his concentration. So you always want to cast dice. If you only have one wizard, you need to cast dice so you have a very large percentage of casting it. I would say a minimum, if you only have one wizard, a minimum 75% chance to make every one of your spells. And that's a minimum. If you have more than one wizard though, it drastically can go down. It can even go to 10% or 5% to cast if you're only going to cast one spell, and that's the last thing you do just to see if you get something off, like a Hail Mary, that kind of stuff. But so again, I would say 75%. If you only have one wizard, don't go any lower than that, because most likely you could get lucky, but most of the time you're just going to be lose concentration, not going to be able to cast it more. So that means you have to make the casting, or that guy sits out for a turn. If you have multiple wizards, not a problem. Then you can waste it. The other thing though to also think about is that it doesn't matter how many dice you roll. If you roll 2 dice or more, if you get double sixes, it's called something called a resistible force, and we'll go through that, what that means. But that means that the opponent can't dispel it. No, it's so strong that there's no way that you can stop it. And to be fair, that also, if someone has a dispel scroll, is something we won't go into this too much in detail, but a magical item most people bring, they can't even stop it anyway. So your spell goes through no matter what. However, if you do, you hit the miscast table, and that's how this little bad boy can go suddenly out of the game, or something else could happen. But well, those are something to remember. So remember the irresistible force. Let's say I go through this. I want to roll 5 dice. Thank you, Baylor. I take my dices, and remember what these dices are for. Get some really heavy metal ones with some pegs on there, and then you just kind of roll over your opponent. But now I rolled this. I got to make this a little simpler for you, I got a 10, a 16, 17, 18, and then this guy right here is worth 4 points. So that's a 22 point. And did I make it? The way you look at this then is say, okay, I wanted 18 plus to cast this, so I definitely made it. Now, after I'm done with casting, Baylor over here is going to look at his dice and say, Hasty has 3 dice left. What else can he cast? And you're allowed to ask to see all the spells that you have, because that's something open that you can have. So Baylor looked through and said, you know what? I'm going to try to take all my dice and dispel it. And he has 5 dice. Remember, you don't let anyone else touch your dice, and this is beautiful. When you bring big, heavy dice, the opponent can't use this against them unless they bring their own dice that are even bigger. So he comes here with his skinny little dice and rolls. And for him to stop this, he needs a 24 plus. And he rolls a 10, 15, 16, and then he has a wizard that is level 4, so that's a 20. He did not reach higher than mine, so therefore he could not dispel it. Let's say he had reached and be able to spell it. That means that this is dispelled. I did not break concentration because I did cast the spell, and then I can try them with my last 3 dice. Since he used all his dice, I know that he won't be able to stop anything of the 3 dice that I rolled. So now I just go at it and find maybe the right spell that I want. But that's how it works. So that's how it goes through. And you could have a magic item where instead of rolling dice, you have a scroll that says I want to remove that or do something else. So, but this went through. So thanks to that, the spell went through. We then look at what happens next. Then we look at it. It says 3d6. So I take Baylor's dice and I take the 3d6 and I roll. Say, how many hits do I get? I get 7, 8, 9. So I get 9. The next thing I then do is take, here's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I then take these 9, and I don't just roll them now and see what happens. I need to actually figure out, what does that mean? So that means that they are a strength 4. So I need to do a couple of things here. I need to know their toughness or any other defenses. So what I do is, I have here I have the Chaos book. And then I go to the page where it says Chariot Knights. And then I look up their toughness value. And the way that this works, since they are on a steed, you look at the largest toughness, and that is a 4. So then I have a 4 and I have a strength 4. And we'll go over this a little bit more, but for now, let's just go on the table. I'll look at the table here. As you can tell, we use this a lot. I drink a lot of coffee, but you go down to the, since it's a spell, it automatically hits, so you don't have to go through hits, but we'll go through that in both the shooting and in the close combat. But then you set to the wound table. And again, you go back here to the end of it. So you say your strength is 4. Then you go across it and find where is that their toughness is 4. And if it's equal on this table, it's a 4+. If you are stronger than the opponent, so let's say I had a 5 and I had a 4, it's a 3, so it goes down. So to memorize this table, I highly recommend you memorize this rule. Equal is always 4+, and then whatever is the difference up and down, you subtract or go down. So for instance, if I had a strength 5 spell versus a toughness 4, you subtract 1 because there's one difference from the equal, and it becomes 1 more easier than me. So the same then if you have 6, it's -2. Then you have only a 2, and then if it's an 8, it's 2. And then remember, you can always fail on a 1, and that's why it doesn't go in anything below 2+. Same thing on the opposite side. Let's say I'm a 4 and he is instead of 5 strength. Remember, it's 4+. If it's equal, now it's 1 harder because it's 1 toughness. Let's say it's toughness 6. That's 3 difference, so 4, 5, and 6. So therefore, it's a +6. So a lot of times when we play, you're going to notice, how does these guys even know what the table's saying? We have memorized this kind of little tricky setup, and it's very easy when you get it, and it makes more fun if you understand the dynamics and how it works. So that means that we have my strength with spell is the same as his defense. That means that I need to do a 4+ to hit. I have no other special things to make it better. So then I roll. I know it's going to be hard for you to see this. So anything that is a 4+ is a hit, and on an average that would be half of them, and this was pretty much average. I missed 5 and I hit with 4. The next thing that will happen is the strength 4. They're going to look at what kind of armor save do we have. They're then going to look at, okay, so we go through, and on this page as well, what I really like about this is that we have is also a cheat sheet for that. So then we'll say, what kind of armor do they have? And I look at this. I have they're mounted, they have heavy armor and shield, and it's the last one right here. So that means that they are mounted, heavy armor and shield. But they can also have something called barding, and that means that they have even extra armor. For now, we're going to say they don't have barding, so they're mounted, it gives you +1, heavy armor gives you 2, and shield gives you 1. So that takes you down to a 3+. Now, this makes it a little bit more complicated because I have a strength 4. I also have to look at, because my magic was so strong, it's better than just a normal human hitting with a little sword. That's a 3. So you go down here to the strength modifier. If it's 3 or below, nothing happens. You don't get negative because you're weak enough. But what you get is, if you're strong enough, like a 4, I get a -1 to his armor save. So instead of a 3+, you add that on, so that's a 4+ now for him to save. So Hasty here will then come over. He will not touch my dice. And you remember that, it's good because I'm going to be playing with these kind of dice against you if we ever play, but the metal ones. So you come with your very skinny little dice, because I won't allow you to play with the bad ones on my table, house rules, so be careful who you play with. They're going to take the 4 and say, okay, I have a 4+ to negate this damage. So I rolled this, and I rolled amazingly. I rolled 3 6s and a 4, and it took no damage. But let's say Chaos wasn't that lucky. I roll again. I roll a 6 and 2 3s and a 2. And remember, if I had my magic was so strong, these 3s would have also been negated. So what I do here then is to say that he saved 1, but he took 3 damage. The next thing we have to do is say, how many wounds does each of these characters have? Because if they have multiple wounds, it could be different. But then you look again, and you look at the wounds section, and it says 1. That means that they only have 1 wound left. That means in the magic phase, And it's not the one that does the damage, it's the one that owns the figure. They decide which ones to take. They're not allowed to take from the front rank if they're back ranks, but they could take 3 over here, 3 over here, or 1 on each side if they liked. They don't have to have a flat one. However, they're not allowed to take, let's say like this, and have an opening between. They need to actually, the figures have to sit together. And why would you care which ones you take? Let's take the characters and run. No, it's because depending on where you are and someone trying to angle and hit you, it could actually be beneficial to take this and suddenly get out of the charge range. So you pick which one. But for now, these 3 died. After that, you go on and you do your next spell. This attack has now been completed and ended, and it worked. Then you have your lore. So remember your lore and fire we talked about. This is important. Now, since I have actually hit them before, then I get a D3 extra. So when I roll for the next time, I'm going to roll 3 dice that I have left, and then I get 1 extra. So I'm going to put, to make it easy, I'm going to put one little, or in this case, put a different dice with it, so you can have. This is why you wanted different dices. Remember, he has nothing to contradict me. So then I go in here and say, you know what? Let's look at what we have. We're going to decide to go with the biggest one and do Flamestorm is what we're going to do. What was that, Baylor? Baylor just said I was cheating because I didn't actually roll to have the best spell to be cast. But you know what? We're gonna go with this anyways, Baylor. I'm sorry, but that's the. This is not for real. I know he's very competitive when it comes to playing, and there's been a lot of barking going on when we play together. So, but he. Okay, you allow me to play. That's good. Thank you. So then I'm going to have to roll this. Normally, to get a... I want to go with a big one, so I'm going to go with 16 plus. And the reason I want to go 16 plus is because I really want to try to hit not just a few, I want to hit them, is what I want to do. So to get 16, remember how we said, I count this, you might do it differently, but this is 3, this is 6, this is 9, plus his 4, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So that would not give me enough. This is a D3 extra I get. So that's an average of 2. So let's say 13, 14, so that's 15. That would not give me, on an average, I should not make this. But since it's the last spell, I'm not so worried about it. Let's just see what happens. I need to get a 16 plus. So that got me 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So that got me exactly what I needed to cast that spell. That was good. And then the next thing we're going to ask, would you like to dispel it? They don't have any dice left, so they cannot dispel it. They don't have the magic items or the spell scroll. So that comes through. What is the next thing we do? Is we move the dices, and then we'll look at what is the damage. Now we're going to do a scatter. I'm going to then say that I'm going to place it here to try to get as many of these guys as possible on there. But I still have to roll a scatter dice, and now I have to roll 2d6. 2d6 to see if it goes in any other direction. Now this moved 4 over, and I would have missed it. Don't tell Baylor what just happened. So I hit directly on, like you can see on the first roll. And with that, then I hit all his units. Normally, if you have a special character, you can do a lookout, sir. But on this one, Baylor's going nuts over here, saying no. On this one right here, then since he hits all of the units, there's nowhere for him to run, so there's no lookout, sir. Now I automatically hit all of them. What is the strength of this? It is a strength 4 again. And so I didn't take how many of these? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But he does have one special unit. It's his champion that's a little bit stronger, so I need to do that one separate. So out of these 7, what I'm going to do is I normally like to play with, here's the 7, but 1 is special. So I just, again, you have an extra dice that's a little different color, then you know which one it is. Remember, I'm 4 against 4. What is that number? That's a 4+, because they're equal, so strength versus toughness is always 4+. So you roll the 4+. This was not so good. I only did 1 damage. Again, shh, don't tell Baylor. And here what you can see is that I'm not moving these dice to hit more, I promise. You see that I hit with 4 of them and 3 I took away. So totally honest games here that we do. There is no change at all. Obviously when your opponent is here, this is not going to happen. But for the show of the game, I want you to see that it's at least 4 gets hit. So that's 4 of them. Not the main guy though, he didn't get hit. Now we go back here. Remember I had a 3+ armor. My spell is a 4, so I have a -1 to armor. That's a 4+. Baylor will then take a round here. He will go around and he will then roll. And he will roll anything on a 4+. He made 1. Notice I didn't cheat and let him save more. And then 3 of them die. So he takes 2 away and he decides to pick this one. Because they're less than 25%, he needs to do a panic test of 9. You have to then look at the leadership, and it's a leadership 8. Because of that, he failed. He now has to run away from my character, and he runs swift stride because they're on horses. So he's going to run 3 of these, but take the 2 highest, not very long, far. It was a 2 1s and a 2, so 3. And that's 2 inches and then a half. So then they run to about right there. And then the last thing, what you do is next turn they were going to have to do rally, or you just roll your dice over them. That's how you do a normal magic phase, with a little bit of cheating to get extra damage. But that is the basics. Now, let's say we started over again, and instead, I rolled the 5 dice in the beginning, and if they roll, actually let's do it with the big ones so you can see. I rolled 5 dice, but 2 of them would have been 6s. Even though Baylor had 5 dice to dispel, he cannot do anything about it because it's a resistible attack. So that everything that just happened on the first spell without fire flame or a magic missile, it actually went through and did a damage, and so the same thing happened. But now I sadly have to do, because it was so powerful, something happens to the wizard, and this is why it's dangerous to do magic. Not only is it a little bit flaky, but this, you think, 2 6s doesn't happen that much, but it actually does, because you cast a lot. So every 12th time something will happen, and on top of that, the opponent can also do something to make this happen more often. Then you go to something called miscast table. And this miscast table, it has a lot of things on it that can happen. So for instance, if you roll a 2 to 4, you can actually on score of 3, the wizard is removed from a castle. So on 2 to 4, you can actually, there's a 50% chance that you actually just die. Otherwise, you lose all the power score. Then 5 to 6, 7, and 8 to 9. It's just basic stuff that is just a little bit of damage on you or someone around, so we don't have to go into that. And then the power drain, the last one is really, as the first one that you wizard could go away, that you lose them altogether. Here you lose mostly the power dice and maybe some levels. When you lose a level, you also lose the spell. So those are a very simplified way of looking at what is a miscast table and what does that look like. So I would say that is probably the basics of casting spells. The next thing I think I want to talk about is if you have a character that has a magic item, you have something called bound spells as well. And they are a little bit different. So remember here with a resistible force, and you go to miscast table and all those kind of things. To simplify that a little bit, let's say this wizard, or let's not even take a wizard. Let's say the King of Chaos is over here. He has a magical weapon that is a bound spell, and it has the same thing as the firestorm, let's say, that we just did with this big template. If he casts that, one, I can't use his levels, even if it was a wizard, so I don't get any bonus to casting it, otherwise I cast the same way. The one thing that's different though is that if I roll a double 6 to do a resistible force, I do not roll on the miscast table. So that's pretty much what happens with the bound spells. Dispelling though is the exact same thing. You dispel it like it, but remember his wizard, or now is my case since he's casting, and this guy was level 3, that's the smaller one. I get the +3 to try to dispel, so it's a whole lot easier for me to dispel a bound spell than it is a normal spell because the levels counters out. And if you have, first, if it's an innate spell from a bound one, that means that it's something internally, then it means that you just can't cast that for that turn and then go on. But that's pretty much it on the spells. Next we're going to go through and actually do a picking the spells, how Skaven does that for real and not cheat this time. And then we'll go through a little bit around where we actually do the actual magic phase here of what you saw on the table. Now we're going to go into the part where we actually pick the actual spells that you're going to use. So in a real game, this what happen is, before you even come, you're going to create your army roster. You picked, let's say, a couple of wizards like we have done here. Pick the level 4 Rune 1 lore, and you pick the level 3 of Plague. So you have to have that on your roster specifically written out, so you don't come in and then when you're looking, oh man, these two lists are not going to work, so I pick one of the 8. You have to actually pick that. However, you do not pick the spells before you come. Some of the fun parts of Warhammer is all the randomness and changes. So even with the exact same lineup of 2 armies against each other, a lot of stuff can happen just because it's a different game. You roll differently in the beginning to get something totally different to get started. So the first thing we're going to look at here is what are the 2 lists. So normally the way it works is that in your army book, you have in the beginning you have a little bit about the special stuff about the army. So like for Skavens, for instance, you have what kind of weapons do they have, what kind of special skills do they have, but we're not going to go into all those details in how to replace Skavens today, that's not the point. But then after that you have all the different main types and a little bit about them, and it talks about each one, a little bit of lore as well, so if you like the lore, it's in there. But mainly people just jump to the skills, what is the skills, and the special abilities, and then they never even read the lore once. But some people really enjoy that, so you can also online find a lot of people that go into really the lore behind the different editions and what happened from Warhammer in the old days all the way up to now the Age of Sigmar, and what do they think is going to happen in the future. Same thing with 40k, 30k and all of those games as well. But what we're going to get to is when we get through all of that, all the characters and what comes down here, you get to the point where you have something, always a magic section. Sometimes it's before the magic item, sometimes it's after, and that's something you have in each of your army books as well. So be careful on that. Just because it's a bunch of magic items in the normal basic rulebook, that's the big thick one, doesn't mean that you're always allowed to have them. So for instance, dwarves is not allowed to have anything of that in the basic one, and instead they have their own magic items. Some you're allowed to have both from the basic and from your army list. So that depends a little bit what's going on here. But to look at the magic, in what we have here in Warhammer 4 Skaven, we have 2 different ones and then one special one. So you can pick either one of these. Normally if you only have one wizard, you're only allowed to pick one, but since I have 2, I've decided to go with one as a standard rune one and then one that is more plague. What's the difference between them? I mean, there's a big difference in the way that it's cast. Is that I would say the Ruin one is more a little bit, I would say, standard, in the sense of you have a normal direct damage or a magic missile that does a little bit of damage. You have a lot of lightning, because that's a lot what they have in this list. And another thing to have is that you have something that's kind of fun is you get Frenzy. That's how you give an extra attack and you have to do certain things like automatically charge, but have Death Frenzy. And that's really cool if you have, for instance, I like to stack that up with that and maybe the monks, and then they get extra attacks. And it doesn't matter if you have a chunk of 40 Skavens that don't cost so much. It doesn't matter if they die a few every turn on purpose because you have this skill. And then you have Crack Skull and Scorch as well. I mean, these are good, templates and massive damage kind of spells. So I would say Ruin, normal magic, comparable I would say to maybe like a Fire Magic, that kind of stuff, but a little bit more Skavenish, if you want to call that, a little bit more random. And then you have the Plague. The Plague is all about Plague is not poison. Poison and plague are two different things, so you can both get poison and plague at the same time, but it's all about doing diseases and that kind of stuff. So it's about massive damage on a lot of creatures. It's really good if you have playing a little bit weaker armies but have a lot of them. Plague is definitely the way to go. I would say Ruins is more if you have a little bit stronger characters going, so you have to pick off the solo kind of team, but they're still good in different ways. I mean, you have the normal. I'm not going to go into all the details, because then we have to go a spell level for spell and then really explain it. Instead, what I'll do is when we pick the spells, then when we're going to cast it, then we go into that one spell. If you really want to know what to do, I'll make it easy like this instead. Just pause the screen right there, and then pause the screen right there, and then you can read it all. So we're going to start with now picking our spells. As before, what we said was you have to have already picked the lore. So we have on our armor roster a level 4 Grazier and not a level 3 that I kept saying this whole time. It's a level 2 Plage Monk. So a little bit weaker, but we haven't cast a magic yet, so it should be okay. We have here is the first thing you do is you're going to have to decide what kind of spells. Every character is a little different, every armor book, but the main thing is, and we get into this is maybe not the best one to get started. I probably should have taken one of the basic 8 where you have a signature spell, but Skaven is kind of like a signature, it just doesn't say it, so I explain the difference. So the first things you have to do is you have 4 dices. You are allowed to roll 1 and then 1 from each one back and forth however you want, or just roll all 4. Why would you ever do that? Let's say they have the same magic. You might have some strategy there of how you roll, so you kind of lock away different spells. Because you definitely on your highest level, you want to have the spells you're going to need to get through, where on the lower level it could be more like the Hail Marys or more like support stuff going on. But now, since there are 2 different lists altogether, it doesn't really matter. So we're just going to take one at a time. The first thing you're going to do is going to take this Grazier, and he's going to take out his spells. I've already sorted them from lowest to highest. So that means that you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There is a extra one. This is called the Curse of the Hornrat, or the Dreaded 13th spell, depending on how you're playing. It's an amazingly strong, so you normally, when you pick a Grazier, you pick him so you can get this. You don't have to pick that yet. The other way is you can replace any of the other rolls with what normally is a signature spell, but now this is the 7th edition, because Skaven they never made the 8th, so this becomes the signature in this list, and that is the Skitter Leap. It also says in the army list that you can replace it with this if you want. Again, signature spells, or in this case, it kind of sets the tone of what the whole list is. So the first thing I do, I take the 4 dices, and I'm actually going to switch that to the big one so you can see what I'm doing. And the way this works is it's a little bit random what you pick. So, and it's very important to get double out of a digit. So if we don't get that, I sadly say I'm going to cheat to get that in there. So I roll 6, I roll 2, I roll a 4, and I roll another 6. So what that means is that this is 1, that is 2, this is 4, This is 6 and that is 6. So that means that these two spells right here, I automatically get those, and I get this one, the 6th one. You do not get to take both of them because it's the same. So if you're really lucky, you want 4 of the same numbers, because then you only pick the one you roll on. Let's say it was 4 6s, you pick the 6th one, and then the other 3 you can move. Since this was a 6, I can now pick any one I want. And I'm going to go with Scorch. So that's the one that I now picked. So that means that this one I cannot get anymore. So I throw that out. So now I have the 4 spells. However, in the army book it says that I can take any of these and replace it with a signature, or I can replace it with a horn one. And you know what? I'm new to the game. I'm going to say all the big spells are the best ones, so I'm going to keep the biggest ones. I'm going to keep that one. I want to replace the Death Frenzy because I can't see why you want to have multiple attacks. Maybe not the best advice, by the way. And I'm going to pick that one instead. And then instead of Warp Lightning, I'm also going to replace that with the Skitter Leap. And this was mainly just to show you how I can replace it. So now, the spells that I have in the end, and you could have done this a little differently, but you saw kind of the setup. So now this wizard has the Skitter Leap, has Cursed of the Horned Rat, he has Scorch, and he has Crack's Call. I would not recommend, just because they are the best ones or the most expensive, to pick them, because remember you only have so many dices. It is good to have a couple of skinny ones and then the rest middle or heavy. It's good to have that one heavy, so you can always use that either to fake it throughout the game that you're casted, or that's the one time when you're really gonna knock someone down. So it's it doesn't matter how many wizards you have and all the stuff. You can roll a low score on the Winds of Magic. Remember how you roll 2 dices and then saw how many dices you have? If you don't roll a good roll on that, no magic phase is gonna be good, right? So don't overclock it by having too many. Now you come in and you do the same thing with the Plage Monk, and I'll get rid of these, but we have to remember which ones we had. We'll put that over there. Same thing, I have ordered this in lowest to highest. You can do 2 ways. You can look in the book and put everything in the right order, or you can just look at a casting cost and quickly just put them in the order of casting cost. And then as long as the opponent sees the way that you roll, so you know this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, everything is kosher. So then again, you take 2 dice. Now, normally don't use big ones, you don't want to ruin your figures. Remember, this is to roll on the opponent. You use this on your own side. But for now, you roll 2. Like you said, knocked over my little priest. This could have been very expensive. It's like about $50 right here. Then you roll a 6. That's the biggest one again, and a 1. I'm actually going to cheat and make that a 2, and I'll tell you why in a second. That means that right now I have to pick these 2. These 3 in the middle, I can't ever pick, so I'm just going to put that to the side. That means that you have these 2, and the reason that Plage Brace is still here, because as a Plage Monk, like a signature spell, I can always replace that with something else. So I look at these 2 and say, you know what? Which one do I want? Obviously, since I'm new, I see like the biggest bad boy of the game, I'm going to obviously take that one. And to be fair, most likely you will in this case, so this is not just a joke. But then you will look at the 2 and say, when I'm playing Chaos, is the Pestilent Breath or the Blast of Filth better? So we'll start by showing you the Plague, the one we're going to use. This one right here is going to be when you hit like a large unit and attacks all of them. Great against someone with a lot of units. This one right here gives you poison attack, or helps you if you have poison already. This could be very good, because then if someone has a lot of toughness, you kind of bypass that. So that's a tough one to pick. And this one is a strength 2 hit. I mean, Chaos is a very strong army. They have lots of toughness. This one wasn't actually do much against them. So We are not going to switch on this one to do the signature spell like I did with the last one. So we're just going to throw that away. And instead, we're going to have these two for the plague. What does this mean now? I mean, if this was a real game and I looked at this, and I was the opponent as well, because I'm allowed to look at their spells. If I was the opponent, I'd be laughing a little bit because they're very expensive. So that means that what can I expect coming up from this? One, it's going to be very few spells. Two, they're going to have to roll a lot of dice to try to get something through. So 1 or 2 spells mostly cast if they have a good magic phase. 1 on average, maybe 2 at most. But if I get something through, it's devastating. So I really need to look at which of these spells could be the worst for me. So that's something I will look at. From now a user of these, I mean, you have to really think about how am I going to do this in the right way, because I have a couple of smaller ones and the rest big ones, and I really have to think ahead of how to use this. This will not be a range of spells that has a lot of utility. This is more in your face, do a lot of damage kind of stuff. So this is what I'm going to have to do now on my magic phase. But that's how you pick your spells. It's a lot of fun if you have multiple ones. If you ever play Wood Elves, for instance, I highly recommend you get 3 wizards and then use different lores, and then with the hit and run kind of tactic with the different lores, you have a lot of versatility to try to stay alive and sneak around and stuff, and it makes it a lot of fun. But most other armies, I would say pick 1 or 2, primarily 1. If you're new to the game, only pick 1. Makes it simpler. All your wizards the same one. That means that all of them are going to signature. A few of them are going to have it. You cannot have the same spell on multiple unless it says specifically. So that means that you can pick them around, but don't have more than 3 wizards. If you have 5 or 6, you think, oh, I can cast spells like nuts. Remember, maximum 12 dice. You can only cast so many spells per turn. You waste a lot of points. It's better than to put it in something else. But you know, a few wizards are good. You could also go like Skavens. Go with level 1 wizard and engineer, and then do lightning a lot on maybe 2, 3. That is a good setup. I don't call that a real wizard in that sense, but in the count of the 1 to 2 that you would like to have. But that is more because you have them as a range. But I would say on an average, 1 to 2 wizards maximum for a 2,000 or 2,400 points. Anything below 2,000, I would say only 1 wizard. But unless you're doing like a Khorne Chaos army where it's all in your face, you don't care, or a Dwarf army, have at least 1 wizard with you. And if you don't have a wizard, have a Dispel Scroll or some other way to counter magic, because it can be very powerful and hard to deal with if you don't have anything against it. Next, we're going to show a scenario where we actually use the spells. So this is going to be the start of the magic phase. It's going to be when we're doing a little bit of fun, just see what would it look like for a magic user to actually be in action, and a little bit more like a show and tell. So this is where we have done the movement phase. The Skavens moved out a little bit, they charged, and then here is now the 2 magic users. You have a priest at level 2 with 2 spells. If you remember, they had the different spells is the plague, that is pretty expensive, and then blessed with filth, that is a little bit cheaper, so they can use. The other 2, then you have the level 4 wizard that is hiding here, and he has the favorite of the Skaven spells, I would say, the Curse of the Horned Rat, or the 13th spell. Then you have the Crack's Call spell, and then he has the Scorch, and then he has the Skitter Leap one. So these are the ones, the spells that we have to play with today. And we're going to play it just like you have ranges and everything else that you can play with, and also what's in the arcs and that. So we'll explain a little bit how that works. So the first thing we need to do is win some magic. And the way win some magic works again is that you roll 2 dice and then see how strong it is, and then the opponent goes. So we'll start with showing here now how this would work and look like. So if we take this and we roll win some magic, normally you will use your dice, but for now we'll use Baylor's. So the first thing we'll do is say, how strong is the wind of magic? That's the first thing we'll do. And then we'll kill off our wizard. No, but the winds of magic is 4. It won't be very much fun magic round if it's this low. So we're going to go with a 6. And then we're going to go with a 4 instead. So you saw me roll very legally 10 instead of 4. What does that mean? That means that I get to take my dice. And I get to take 10 dices from this. So I'll take, here's 5 or 6, and then it's another 4. So that gives me 10 dices, is what I'm going to have in my magic phase. Then, if you remember correctly, the opponent then get to take and have the opposite on their side. They get to take the biggest one, and that would be, in this case, would be the 6, because that's what they have. So when you do roll, you roll, that's the total amount, and then the opponent takes the biggest dice. So I'll just switch these to make it a little easier. So here is Baylor's, and here is mine. Next thing I do is something called winds or channeling. I have 2 wizards. These are my 2 wizards. To get an extra dice, I need to roll a 6 on either of those. I'll use different dices to showcase what that will look like. And I got a 1 6 and 1 5, so the 5 doesn't do anything. That gives me 1 extra dice for the channeling. Now the opponent is going to go and do the same. He only has 1 wizard, so he only gets to roll 1 dice. Normally he doesn't get to use your dice, but in this case you can see what we're doing. He rolls a 5, and he doesn't get a dice. However, I've been cheating on my side all day long, so we're going to roll a 6 instead and give him a chance. So he rolled a 6, and then he get 1 more dice as well. So that is channel. Let's say now that we had some other items, then it might be in the chaos that he gets some more dice. But since we're not playing with that, we're not adding. So this will be our magic phase. So I'm really doing 11 dice against a 6, 7 of his. So there's going to be a very great magic phase here with lots of dice. The only thing is that's not so good as when you have a 6 and a 4 is that he has a lot of ones. So here comes tactic. It's actually better to have even numbers and a few other things like that. But again, when you roll dice, you can't do like me when I'm now here on video cheating and changing up dice. You roll what you roll, and that's what you stick with. So here we have the magic phase is going to start. What is the first thing you do in a magic phase? The first thing you do is you have to sit down and decide what is it you want to accomplish. So I recommend while the other person is playing, you have plenty of time and read through these and say, what am I going to do? Okay, so without telling Baylor, what we really want to do is do this spell on this unit right here. This unit. That's what we want to accomplish in the spell, so shh. So Baylor, so I hide that one, and that one cost me 25. So what is an average on 25? We're going to have a lot of them, right, to roll this. So, and it's this guy running it. So what we're going to do is trying to get him to use some of his dice up front. So either you can do 2 different school salts. You just go all out and run this right off the bat and roll it and then get it out of the way. Another way is to do it in the middle, or one way is to do it in the end. But it all depends what you're doing. I've noticed that Baylor's very aggressive when it comes to gaming, and what I mean with that, he likes to jump on the figures, eat them, crack them in pieces, and run away, and try for me to not see that he did it. So taking that in account, I think I need to tease him with something first, like throw out maybe, let's say this model first that is nice and chewy, and then see what's going on. So without taking away too many dice, I'm going to be maybe, can I lure him to cast something that has poison attacks? Probably not. I don't think that's going to be good enough, because the only one I would do poison attacks is this one right here. And it's a range 12, so I don't think I can range it. So I think he's going to realize that is not a good one. Plague, however, is within 18 inches. So then you always have to do your measurement, and that is within. So maybe if I target this unit and make him think that this is my big play. So everyone knows this is going to be the guy that is shooting. He's going to be casting Plague on these units, and they're very expensive. I mean, this is one of those one-hit wonders kind of thing. When they get in, they're going to slaughter that team right there. So if we can weaken these before they come in, I might have a chance. Baylor will know that this is something that he has to deal with. And right now, he's going to think that this is the big one that I'm going for. Like, why else, right? So what does this say here? Let's see if we can zoom in a little bit on this for you. What is the spell that we're doing? We're doing Plague, cost 13. And choose one enemy unit within 18. That would be the one from the caster. Even if they engage in close combat. This is very good to use, by the way, because a lot of times as a Skaven, you're going to be in close combat. They have something called slaves, extremely cheap units. You throw them in, lock a player in place, and then you start attacking them with all kinds of stuff. Each model in an affected unit must take a toughness test. If the test is failed, the model suffers a single wound with no armor saves allowed. If cast on a unit engaged in close combat, all units involved in a friendly or foe will be affected. After working out the effects of the spell and removing costs, they all roll a dice on the chart below and continue to apply their souls until the spell is effect. Here's some really cool stuff. If I roll a 1, this is more like the Skaven stuff. 1, it backfires and goes to mine. And then 2 to 4, the spell ends, and 5 to 6, as a casting player, I didn't get to put it on another unit within 12. So for instance, these guys will be within. And then, obviously, if I hit this guy, I'm hoping I'm going to roll another 5 or 6, and then hit this guy, and then that guy. And then sadly, if Baylor doesn't notice that it was within 12 inches, I'll jump all the way across up to the Demon Prince up there, and we'll take him out as well. But let's see if Baylor noticed, or let's see what the dices are. But you know, it could happen. What's the chances though? 5 or 6, that's 1/3, and then another 1/3, another 1/3 less than that, another 1/3. If you know how to do math, you know that it's almost not possible, except if you're filming and you do it off camera. So in other words, pay attention to what the other player's doing. So I'm going to try to cast this. This is very important I get this through, or at least Baylor thinks so. So I know he has a total of 7 dices. I have a total of 11 dices, but remember, I have my secret spell over here. So I'm going to try to get rid of as many dices as possible from his stack, or possibly even get the spell in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pretend that this is my big hitter, that this is the one I'm going to go for. So I'm going to take 6 dices, and I'm going to try to cast to get it. So I am a level 2. Remember, he is a level 3 wizard. And what we're going to do here is I'm going to roll. And he has a level 3 wizard. And I have a level 2 wizard, so he has all 1 up on me. So I'm going to say, Baylor, I'm going to play Plague. I'm going to cast it, and I'm going to cast it on this unit. So this guy up here, that is up top here, I put him down there so you can see him. He's going to cast it on this one. Baylor says, fine, go for it. And I roll, and something happened that I didn't mean for happening. I got an irresistible force. If you use too many dice, what could happen is that you automatically get it. So now my whole goal, right, was to have my best spell, get rid of some of Baylor's dices. However, since I did an irresistible spell, I wasn't allowed to actually, or he wasn't allowed to actually counter it. So it automatically goes in. It doesn't matter how much I roll on these. If you get 2 6s or more, you automatically get it in. So the first thing that's going to happen, we have to remember that this happened. So I'm going to put the 2 6s next to him, so I remember that he's going to go on the miscast table. But you resolve the dices, and you take away the dices. He still has 5 left, if that he still gets to keep them. The next thing that happens here is that we do a toughness test on everyone within this unit. Baylor will then take, he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. He has 8 of his characters. and they all have 3 wounds. So I can sadly not kill off all 8. If they had 1 wound each, you can actually, if I get really lucky. The toughness test is a test on them. They have toughness 4, if you remember. Actually, they might have a little bit more, so we have to look that up. Give me a second. Yeah, the Skull Crushers of Khorne. Last time we attacked, if y'all remember, it was actually these that that had toughness 4. That was just the normal Chaos Riders, right? But now we're attacking his bad boys over here that are Skull Crusher of Khorne. The character's top still don't have 1 wound, but that's not how it works. When you're writing something that's part of a unit like this, you actually go with the highest toughness and highest wounds, but then individually when you fight, you go with a skill. So if you look at this army list over here, you're going to see there's 3 different kinds. There's a Skull Crusher, a Skull Hunter, and then the Juggernaut of Khorne. They have a Skull Hunter and a Skull Crusher, and then you have the Khorne. Because there are 3 wounds, we have to go on all of them. However, there is one, the guy up here in front, he is the special one. That is the Skull Hunter, and because of that we have to roll him separately. So the way we do this is that, again, as normal, I take the 8, that is all of them, take away 1, and do a different dice, and that's why you want the different dices. They all have the same toughness, so they have the toughness 4 actually. So it's the same as the last ones, but they have more wounds, and they do a lot more damage. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to then roll, and you're going to see toughness 4, without even looking at a table. I know 4, actually you don't need a table because it's a toughness test, so toughness 4, that means 1, 2, 3, and 4 that pass. And if you can notice here, there's only, Baylor really rolled amazingly. Out of all of them, he only took 2 damage. And now in a normal battle, remember when I did 1 wound, we just took off 1 each. These actually has 3 wounds each. Since it was not the special character, this units, then it all goes on the same one. This is why we have these little special dices that is a little bit smaller, for instance. A lot of times if we don't have enough of these, we just use the red ones or yellow ones. But they have 3 wounds, and they took 2, so now they have one of the guys here in the back only has 1 wound. So I have to say, out of all of that magic, we didn't do too good on that. It would have been a whole lot better getting in the Curse of the Horned Rat, because that one, my friend, would be like every unit that failed, they actually just, or every part that fails would have just gone. We still have a chance though, because we have 5 dice, so we're going to try it. So now this happened. The next thing you have to do with Plague, this was a little bit fun about this, you get to roll on this 1 through. So we're going to roll with a dice and see if it goes to the next. Number 4. Number 4, it actually spells end. And I'm not going to cheat here and jump to the next one and next one and next one. That would have been a little bit, maybe too much, but that's how it works. So this is a spell really fun if you're lucky. It jumps around and it could jump on your own, but it's okay in Skavens because you have a lot of units, so you don't mind if a little bit dies as long as you can then use it back on the opponent. So then I normally like to do this where I turn over the one, and that spell has been resolved. Now, problem is I rolled a double 6. What does that mean? Irresistible force. So if we go back to our cheat sheet, or what we do when we print out at the end of the book, you have this what you call miscast table. And then roll 1 to 2, you can lose your character. 5, 6, 7, and 8, and 9, you take damage, and then the last one you lose levels. So 7 is the one that we really want. So the first thing I have to do then is take 2 dice and roll, and then see where I end up. I rolled a 12. Oh wow, okay. So 12, that is power drain. So let's read that out. Power drain, the wizard level is reduced by d3. Okay. So I was at 2, so a d3. So then I roll a d6, and if you remember, you have the results. So 1 and 2 is a 1, so there's 1. So now instead of a wizard level of 2, he's now a 1. And this again is why we have extra dices. So this dice here is a d10 with 10 of them. And now everywhere I place this guy, I'm always going to put this next to him, and I have a 1. The first spell that you lose, and it's probably, actually let's read it instead of me just telling you what it is. The first is the spell that was miscast. Other spell loss are determined randomly. The wizards cannot attempt to cast any further spells this turn. So what that means is that the first one he loses is the one we cast, and since that is this one, we just throw that away over there. So he's not allowed to use that anymore, and then you now have only one. Now he only has one spell left, and he's level 1. What does it mean to level 1? That means that 1, he only has one spell, and 2, that means that from now on, when he's trying to do something against, like say this Chaos Guy that's level 3, I only get a 1+ bonus where he gets +3. So now it's going to be a whole lot harder to cast. The next thing I'm going to do here is I'm having 5 dice left. And Hasty, if I remember correctly, he had 6 dice. Maybe no, actually, I think he had 7. But I had 5 versus 7 is what it was. Alright, if you look at it this way, whatever I cast, he should be able to stop because he has a level 3 wizard. I want to cast me my level 4. So I let you think about how is the way that I'm going to win this. It's really, I want to throw all my dice at it and hope I get a double 6 again. So now comes all or nothing, and you pretty much could do this because if the opponent has more dice than you, you can either say it's too dangerous because I don't want to do a miscast and see what happened to this guy, or I can go all out. Of course, right now we're doing an all or nothing kind of guy. So this guy over here, he's going to do a spell, so let's read what this is. Curse of the Horned Rat. It's actually the most powerful spell in the game, some people say. This spell can affect a single infantry unit within 24. Yeah, we have that. It needs to be in line of sight of the caster, and that's why we are hiding behind this right here. Actually, now move them, but remember how we moved them over here so you could see out? Is how you can actually attack this guy. And this is how you can see that his angle. And again, if you're not 100% sure, bring out your airsoft gun and either do a one shot or a burst, depending who you're playing. Then, so you can see it, the next thing that we have is that, or let's do this instead. It's a successful cast. The cast turns 4d6 of the targeted units and models into clan rats. So you actually turn the opponent into your own rats. And it's 4d6. And how do you stop it? If the number rolled is equal to or greater than the number of models in the targeted unit, remove the enemy models and replace them with clan rats with any normally control, like you control the unit. If the caster player does not have enough models to replace the entire unit, transfigure what you have. This is one of the ways the Game Workshops forces you to buy enough models. But in essence, you know, when you're playing, you just replace it. And then here's the last part: is this they simply mutate and die, or were slain by horrified comrades. No saves of any kinds are allowed against a twisting power horn rate, and that is what is disputed. That last one, no saves at all. So no ward save, regen, nothing can actually save them. So we're gonna roll here, and for you that are voting on my side with my 5 dices, thank you for helping out. And then Baylor, the ones that are voting with Baylor, that are not playing with me, I don't appreciate that, but you know, everyone has a favorite. Maybe you vote for underdog Baylor, you know. Then I'm gonna roll my 5 dices. I need something high. I did not roll a double 6, so that's gonna be tough. So let's count this out. I have 10, 15, 16, plus 3 is 19, plus my level of 4 is 23. Now Baylor, he's not allowed to roll all his dice, so he's allowed to roll a maximum of 6. He's going to roll 6 dices. He's going to go with 10. He's going to go with another 9, so it's 19. 20 plus 3 is 23. So we got even. On an even score, we actually win. So then we go. So this was great for us. Then we start with, what does this actually mean? This means that 4d6, or we'll do the smaller dice again, 4d6 That means 10, 11, 12, 13. So 13 models. So I think we might be close on this. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 models. And so we took the whole unit plus some. So instead of these, we now have to replace these with clan rats. So we're just going to pretend these are clan rats. So thank you for that. We just took out his whole unit with that spell and saw how powerful a magic round could be. And then now instead I control these 8 clan rats. Not so good to fight with, but I have to say they're great to be in the way, and then they die. But you can always use models like this to put them in another order. And now I have no more dice. The opponent has some dice. 1 dice left. I haven't cast anything that stays in play, so now the magic phase is over. But after this magic phase, I would say is a very successful one for myself. Baylor is not so happy that one of his larger units was just obliterated by first spell that did almost nothing to wounds, and other ones just took him out of play. And now you can see what one of the most powerful spells in the game can do. And imagine if you have anything, you need to stop that one. And this is why you normally have in this whole spell. But that was the magic phase. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you soon get started and play in your own games and have a blast.